Ready to have a deeper conversation about body and soul, sacred leadership, and our collective evolution? Welcome to the Wise Body Ancient Soul podcast with me, your host, Charisse Sisou. Hello and welcome. I am so delighted today to bring my dear friend Lisa Barnett on to share with us her wisdom. And I could say a million things about Lisa, but I will share her official bio so that we're starting on the same page. Lisa Barnett, besides being just a wonderful light on the planet and someone that I am lucky to call friend, she is the founder of the Akashic Knowing School of Wisdom, where she has taught thousands of students worldwide to access personal soul wisdom and guidance to transform their lives, working directly with their personal Akashic record. She is also the international best-selling author of 4 books on the Akashic records, and today we'll talk about her newest book, AKASHA. With more than 25 years of experience in spiritual healing, Lisa teaches these simple tools which empower individuals to find greater fulfillment, happiness, abundance, and health. Lisa helps you align with your soul path, understand your soul contracts, and complete your karma and vows. So excited to welcome to Wise Body Ancient Soul, Lisa Barnett.
Oh, thank you, Charisse. Oh, I so love you, and I'm so excited to be here with you and get to talk about the brand new book, Akasha. So thrilled. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for letting me share this wisdom.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure, really and truly. And as we were just talking about before we hopped on, one of the things that makes this, your newest book, different is that it is this kind of coming together of multiple perspectives. Tell me more about that. Like, how did that come to be? How did that idea come to be?
Well, so I am actually part of a series of books. I am the 11th book in the series, and the idea of Common Sentience, which is the name of the whole series by Sacred Stories Publishing, is that we take the author's wisdom, so my wisdom about the Akashic records and Akasha, along with, I have 20 people who have written stories about their experiences and how their experience in the Akasha has actually transformed their lives. And they're phenomenal stories. And so we've bookended the stories with the first part, which I really explain all about the Akashic records, about your soul plan, how it can help and support you to really make transformational choices in your life. And then the third part is, again, I actually teach my 5-step wisdom prayer system. I teach you how to access your own Akashic records in this brand new book. So it really has wisdom about the Akasha, stories of people's experiences of accessing this wisdom. And then I teach you how to do that along with quite a few guided visualizations, Akashic record tools that I've been given. So the book is really chock full of really everything that I've been teaching over the last 25 years.
Yeah. And I so appreciate it. I love that. I love that it is bookended in that way, where you have an introduction for people who are perhaps new. What I love is that more and more people do know about the Akashic records, more than I would say at any other time. And but even in this period of awakening, it's so great to just have that introduction there. So it almost like, pulls some high level summaries from some of your early, they can also then dive deeper with your earlier books, which I love. But I think that's really fantastic. And I I'm a big believer, especially in this podcast, we tell a lot of stories. And I just believe that that's the way that we learn. It's been the way that we've learned since the beginning. And so I do love that there's all these personal stories. How were the people who contributed? How are they chosen? Were they your clients, your students?
You know that many of them are both of those, my clients and many of my students have written stories. So we
Very cool.
really sent out a call for stories. And that's part of what Sacred Stories Publishing does with with these Common Sentience books is they send out a call for stories on the Akasha. And I, of course, emailed it to my thousands of students that I've taught over the last 25 years around the world. And then, they picked 20 because, you can only put so much in a book, and really 20 of the juiciest stories are in
Yeah.
here. So it's really, really exciting because, of course, as I say, some are my students. And then to read the story that they wrote
Mm.
was so kind of exciting and even eye-opening for me. One of the women I actually had done worked with her as a client, and she was also a student, and she was working with some property, some land she had in Ireland, and she really built a big house, and then her whole family along with her fell sick and she couldn't figure
Mm.
what was wrong. It was a brand new building. And really, we realized, as I have, experienced numerous times in doing Akashic readings for people, that sometimes the land has its own energy and may not want us there. Or there may be old energy, some old dark energy that we can clear. And so she had this really profound experience and did so much work on the land through the Akashic records. So I won't spoil the story, but it was like, wow, you kind of took what we started in a reading, and with your experience and having learned to read your own records through my online courses, she just went really deep,
Yeah.
made huge choices. She, after doing a lot of ancestral healing, because she is
Yeah.
from Ireland and there had been a lot of wars on that land, and she was to do some clearing around that. After doing her work, she made a new
Mm.
choice. And so it's to me just so phenomenal to see how powerful the Akashic records are when you use them and allow them to guide and help you make new choices and to really truly transform your life that way.
Yeah. Yes. Well, oh my gosh. Well, I had the pleasure of I have not I still have more stories to read, but I had the pleasure of really skimming through and trying to glean as much. I loved the summarizing. I loved your story. I don't want to give any spoilers away.
Wait,
And
which one? There's two in there.
I well, I read the I read the first one about and I can say this because it's in the
Yeah.
table of contents. It's like that
Yes.
life is a whale. And
Yes.
oh, I have to share this because that was so confirming for me because I was in Hawaii for the first time in
Mm.
January, and I met the teacher, one of the teachers that I was training with. I was there to belly dance, and the lovely woman that was hosting the retreat, we did this beautiful opening ceremony, and so we learned the aloha, which is really where forehead to forehead, and you share a breath together. And as I'm looking deep in her eyes, I was like, she was a dolphin. I'm like, and I was like, am I making this up? And then when I read that story, I was like, no, I wasn't making that up. I was like, this is why, because I just had this like understanding as I was looking into her beautiful eyes and her playful, just she has this playful, bright energy. And I was like, oh, this is why she likes Maui so much. This is why she loves these islands, and had been coming back there for many years before finally making a home there. And so when you shared your story, I was like, Okay. That makes sense because I
Yeah.
didn't, I am also on my learning journey of, in terms of the different lifetimes and how we can express in all kinds of ways, places in the universe and in the solar system, space system, whatever we want to call it, etc. So, and I love that you bring all that together in such an accessible way, easy to
Well, and that's
understand.
again the kind of the joy of this particular book is that it's a perfect book if you're a beginner, if you feel like, oh, I've heard about the Akashic records. I know people talk about it. I'm not 100% sure, what is there. Sometimes students come to me and they say, well, I know there's past life information, but what else? What else can it do for me? How else can it help me? Maybe I don't really care about my past lives. But
Mm.
one of the ways it can really support you is that before you embody, every single time you decide you're coming back to Earth or anywhere else, you say, I want to make a plan. I have lots to do when I'm there. And so I have people that I want to share my life with. I have soul sisters like Charisse. And I feel like there's people, are sometimes it's children or significant partners, or sometimes it's parents and sometimes it's not, but we want to bring gifts and talents that we've honed in other lifetimes. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I look at past lives in a reading, I'm not looking for lifetimes where you were famous. I'm looking for lifetimes where you had honed a gift or a talent, you had a wisdom, you had that already done and, actualized, and it's that gift you want to bring forward in this lifetime now. And so
Mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
can literally go and look at some of these lifetimes where maybe you've been a healer, or for you, possibly you had many of those belly dancing lives. And so it was like a natural for you. That was a gift that was already built into the energy of the body you picked. And, the lineage we pick, we really make so many choices about our life. And it's all written in your Akashic records. And so it helps us to figure out what is not just my purpose, because purpose, we have many purposes, but it's
Mm-hmm.
our soul contracts with other people are part of our purpose is to
Yeah.
support these people, or sometimes to teach or to learn from them. Sometimes there's karmic patterns attached to that. So that's our soul growth and our learning. So all of that I really explain in the first part of the book. And I even go into talking about how the Akashic Records is part of the quantum field of source and what that actually means to us in accessing past life energy and to do phenomenal quantum healing through your Akashic Records. So
Mm.
really lots of juicy information. And then, of course, we have these amazing stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I find I where I'm so fascinated is that intersection where because I 100% believe in that piece though, where we come in with a plan, we come in with so much intention, kind of putting all the pieces together, and it's so complex and sophisticated. Like it really boggles my mind sometimes when I really sit back and think about it because it also feels like, we're not the only ones at that party, our ancestors, like our, you know what I mean? It's like a whole I like to call it my wisdom council, you know what I mean? Where we
Mm.
make this plan. I'm so interested in where it interacts with the body and how everything is so perfectly designed. Like you were talking about me with the dance, for example. And I did have that experience where my first class in, it was like I felt so at home. And I remember, I once was dancing at a club in Las Vegas, and the just playing like with the dancer that was there, she was performing, and I just hopped up and joined her, and we were just riffing off of each other. And she's trying to tell the owner later, like, oh yeah, she's from Chicago. And he was like, no, no, no. And I was like, she's like, no, really, she's a Chicago dancer. She's just here visiting. I was there for a business thing. And he's like, no, she's not from Chicago. Only Arabic women move like that, right? And he said it, and I was like, very flattered by the compliment, but also felt that it was something that I came in with. I had the same experience in hula. I was like second class in, and I did a move, and the teacher just looked at me and blinked, and she was like, in 25 years of teaching, no one has picked up that move just like that. And by then I was kind of very comfortable. So with this idea of past lives, and I just knew, I was like, yeah, because I've been there many times
Many
before.
times, right? It's not a once or twice
Yeah.
thing. It's many, many lives. And in, in all sorts of countries in the Middle East and
Yeah.
Egypt and all of these countries where we've learned so many interesting gifts, like the dance, but the priestess energy, and a lot of the
Yeah.
wisdom keepers have spent a lot of lives in these countries back thousands and thousands of years ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's so fun when it starts to show up in our lives really clearly, like it does for you, Charisse. But
Yeah.
it is one of the ways that we can even start to hone in on some of our purposes, because it's often
Yes.
that thing that comes so easy. It's just like, oh, I feel that in my heart, and I love that, and that's so joyful, and it's easy.
Yeah. Right. There's pleasure. There's like, it's almost like these breadcrumbs that we leave for ourselves, like the pleasure, the joy, the ease is like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, pay attention. This is important. And
Right.
I find too, like the wisdom that we go to bring forth, it's all connected, right? That the past lives that are the most impactful on our current life, and I'd love for you to speak to this. Um, I see as the ones that are closest to, like, I'm remembering that lifetime because it's important to what one of my purposes is here, right? And or contracts and all of that stuff. Tell me more about that, because of course we have so many lives, so many. We have this whole library. Um, Tell me more about that. That unique combination of the ones that we kind
Right.
of come in with, or that are closest to
Absolutely.
our current life
Yeah, and
incarnation.
it's so beautiful because one of the ways it works is that we have um, personal soul contracts, we have gifts and talents, and then we have kind of collective or group contracts. And so there's a couple of really big collective group contracts on the planet right now. And one of them is about rebalancing divine masculine and divine feminine energy, because the record keepers say that the male and the female energy are so out of balance right now. Until we rebalance, and that means equal, not a flip, but really equal,
Totally.
we will not really be able to create the new earth and literally ascend energetically, which is part of what we're here to do. And that doesn't mean ascend in a starship or die or anything else. It's about
Right.
recreating the world and creating this new earth that's in balance, that is in love and peace and joy, where everybody is balanced. We come back into community and stop being the lone wolf and all of these kinds of things. So part of your contract is very much about helping women to step into their divine feminine power, their gifts and
Mm,
talents. And again, one of the old programs on the planet is very much about lack of worthiness, about self
mm,
doubt. Of course, there's been a lot of abuse, and really, even women have been very enslaved, of course, literally through history. But even energetically, when we look back over the last even few hundred years, it was like we were still chattel, right? We were still
Yeah.
basically owned. You were the woman that had the kids, who cleaned the house, who walked miles for the water, and it is still happening in enough, countries on the planet that there are thousands and thousands of women with that contract. And so we bring in all these pieces. So it's interesting because we're so unique. So you bring in this piece of the dance and the wisdom, but I know you bring in that awareness of the shame that was attached to different parts. And so
Yeah.
your book, right, Shameless, is a profound way to share your story and how
Mm.
that leads to you and your soul contract around helping women to move past their shame, to own their power, their beauty, their
Yeah.
divine feminine energy. And so they're very big and very profound contracts that we have come to shift. And so we can start to look at some of the other lifetimes where we've actually actualized that, where we've been
Yeah.
part of an ancient mystery school, where we were part of the divine feminine goddess temples and healing centers in, again, thousands of years ago, many of them in Persia and even Egypt and the Middle East, many of these places. And
Mm.
so we can tap into the wisdom that we already hold to help us and support us in doing the work that we have decided to do. And so it's very beautiful when we can start to even get that validation, when we see that we were wisdom keepers,
Mm.
when we know that we were divine goddess, feminine healers in some of these ancient mystery schools. When we can own that,
Sure.
then we can energetically, again, through this quantum field of the all where the Akasha is stored, we can start to energetically bring those codes into this body now, realigning that with your life, right? To build those
Ye-
bridges to
Yeah.
go forward. So,
Yeah. You are
profound time
speaking
in
my
history.
language. Yeah, you are speaking my language right now because this is um, what you said something so beautifully in your book that I talk about in Shameless as well. Because I kind of think of this is going to sound weird, but I kind of think of shame as like a battery, not a battery so much as like bound energy, right? And
Mm.
when we release it, that now becomes energy that's available to us to use. But there's also, it's like behind that, behind the trauma, because really it's like, where does that come from? It comes from trauma. Behind that is that kernel, that nugget of wisdom, that intelligence that we're needing now. And you said something very similar in your book about, once we're able to get past the healing part, the healing of that trauma, right? Because speaking of the mystery schools and the priestesses, like, we didn't shift into a different system like peacefully. it was
No.
like you said, very often quite drastic. And and then you start to layer that as well with not just kind of that masculine feminine, but different permutations of that, where people of different races, people of different backgrounds were considered property or less than, or were colonized, enslaved, etc. So you start to layer all of that stuff on. And that first step, right, is in the kind of the revealing, the healing, the reintegrating. And then you said something really cool that I would love for you to expound on some more, which is then that unlocks these codes that can then be like reassimilated, reintegrated into the body. Tell me more about that.
Right. So the truth is that we are so friggin' ancient. Very few people ever wrap their brain around it, right? So I know personally that I have lived on Earth over 1,000 times. Now, let me just say how appalling that has been to me in so many ways, right? Because my story is that when I was about 3 years old, I realized I was like, I'm in a body. I'm trapped back in this body.
Mm.
Oh my gosh. Kind of, I remember this little toddler trying to have a conversation with my mother and being like, whew, why doesn't she understand me? Because I'm talking baby talk. And I'm like,
Right.
no.
You're
What was
so
I
awake and came in
thinking?
so aware. Yeah.
And of course, the reason that I had that kind of experience is that I had 1,000 lifetimes where I had done many things. And this time I'm like, yes, it's here. I'm going back in. I'm helping to re-anchor the Akash back on the planet because it had been pulled away by the record keepers in the Dark Ages. So 1,000 years ago. We've literally been without access to our own Akashic records because we misused that energy. And so, and I do talk about some of this in the book and about this
Mhm.
amazing quantum field and how we also have all these galactic lives. And so then I can go back and look at some of these lives because I am very Sirian. I'm from the dog star Sirius. I am very water, very mermaid, mer people. Also, again, the blue, the energy is very water, and that's
Mm.
from other, star lives where I've lived on Sirius and other kind of water worlds. And so everything we do is written. It is all energetically recorded in your own personal library, which we often call the Akashic Records. And it is there and it holds very much energetically some of these codes, or sometimes we call them keys, because
Mm.
again, when we're writing that plan, we're like, I want to bring back that key that opens that wisdom of the Akasha again, so that I can access that in this life, or I wouldn't have brought that code or that key back 500 years ago because it wasn't time, right? The
Right.
planet wasn't ready. The energy on the earth wasn't high enough. The alignment, the galactic alignment that we're experiencing now, right, with the galactic center energetically is moving us into a new golden age, which again, we haven't had in, I don't know how many thousands of years, but a lot, we energetically, it's not only are you writing out a plan and saying, I want to have these, I'm going to play with my soul family. I'm going to have these parents who hold some energy wisdoms. So often in our genetic lineage, our ancestral lineage, there are energetic keys and codes that help us wake up and remember and sometimes trigger. And so sometimes it's more challenging or painful, and sometimes they're triggers
Mm.
around helping us to wake up, right? So much of the trauma that we experience, we put there. We choose to have that in our lives. We pick that family so that we can get triggered by that pattern, do our own healing for ourselves and often for our ancestral lineage and our family, our family of origin in that moment too, as well
Yeah.
as learning, growing, and sharing, right? All of that we have learned. And so these energetic codes, really, we hold always, all of us, in our energy field, in our body. And it's part of what
Yeah.
draws us to each other. It's like, ooh,
Mm.
I kind of recognize that energy, or I have a matching energy. So we're magnetic in that way. So we're drawing people to us who are here, energetically, magnetically, to help us, to support us, to learn from us, for us to learn from, to have as our children or our significant partners. And so all of these energies of codes
Mm.
are here to really help us as we're moving forward, creating this new earth, this new energy. And for us as light workers, it's almost a way to build a bridge is probably the easiest way. So I sometimes look at it like these codes almost as like bricks. If you were building a brick and mortar bridge over to the other side, over the old energy to the new earth. Those are the codes that are helping me to build that bridge, drawing students and clients and people to read the book so that they can start to pick up these codes and these energies and start to build their own bridges. So it's beautiful, and we all have our own versions of them, and as light workers, that's part of what we have come to do, and that's really how we do it in the unseen realms, in the multi-dimensional realms.
It's so juicy, everything you just said. I wanted to just hop back for a moment. I know, because I really want to ask about how this interacts with the body, because my intuitive sense is that it's connected. Even when we talk about, unlocking and keys, I think of like DNA activations. Like I think about information that's stored in the body, some of which, like, depending on what timeline we're dropping into, right? What is appropriate to bring forward versus other times, and kind of like activating those parts. Does that make sense? Like, is that?
Oh, absolutely. So often we are kind of looking for and, searching for, hoping, aligning to some of these other people, because we actually have, it's a matching kind of activation. It's like if, if I hold a key and you hold a key, and there are 5 of us who created some pattern in a past life, that maybe it's time to release and delete that pattern because it's a program that is not helpful for us anymore, like the one of shame, right? And so
Right.
the 5 of us are kind of looking for each other. 90% of the time it's pretty unconscious, let's say, to bring those 5 keys together, and maybe through a ceremony or even a conversation or a creation. Maybe we create a business together, or we just all become best friends. We are bringing those keys together so we can consciously or unconsciously literally start to unravel some of these old programs that we've written.
Wow, that's powerful.
So energetically, right, we're holding them. And so it's pretty profound. And, it's an interesting thing when it comes to sacred travel, very similar. So again, we hold these keys and these types of codes that most of us are unconscious of. And then sometimes we are called for some, kind of random reason. Somebody shows up and they're leading a trip to, to Scotland or to Egypt or to wherever it might be, Peru. And you're like, I have to go. I'm just called. No idea why. Well, likelihood is you hold some keys that are calling you there.
Yeah.
Right? And I know on my last trip to Scotland, I am a very warm water person, let me just say. So most of my water is all about something warm, right? Wherever that is. That could be the Caribbean or Hawaii or Thailand or Bali or,
Right.
someplace warm.
Not Lake Michigan after the winter. Yeah. No cold plunging for you.
Right. Um, but I was really called. My daughter decided to go to Edinburgh University, and I was called to take the whole family and travel all over Scotland, but not just anywhere. Of course, I was called to go to all these ancient standing stones. So we went out to the outer Hebrides island where you had to take a 3 hour ferry out there to see the Callanish stones. And I hugged every one of those stones because those stones hold energy. And I know there was an energy transfer of what I was holding from, I'm going to say, 15 to 20,000 years ago, because those stones were not put there in modern time. I mean,
Yeah.
they were buried deep. They're so old. And I was there. I know it was a past life. So I know there was a code or some keys that I was holding. And so I was hugging them and giving that back and receiving some of that gift of that energy and that remembrance. And there was another big piece that I realized was that Scotland also holds, it's called the Albion light body, which is divine masculine energy. And while I was there, I went to the Isle of Iona, which was an ancient, again, a church has been built upon it, but there is a very ancient site underneath it of, again, divine feminine. It was even a monastery for women, the Isle of Iona. And then I went to the beautiful, I'm going to draw a blank on the name, the chapel of Rosalind Chapel, which is pure divine feminine. Again, so what I felt was I was literally moving energy around Scotland. So holding all the divine feminine, going to Rosalind, going to these isles, hugging these stones, right? Going on to Iona. So it's like, and I didn't really have to do anything but say yes and do it, right? So
Right. Right.
that was the point, right? So
I was actually writing, I did an episode on something about that just a few episodes ago regarding my travel to France as well as more recently to the Philippines, where I just felt like I could feel. And what fascinates me too, and what I love even about the story that you told, like hugging the stones, is that this is all happening through the body, right? It's like this really fantastic, energetic exchange, and yet it's still happening here, which I think is so cool, where you got that feeling to go. Like, we got that feeling to go somehow after not being to the Philippines for years and years and years and years. It was like the whole family, we went together. And I just knew that I was there to move energy around, to heal some stuff for my family, for my ancestors, and they were like, and it was like almost like you're pulling up a long buried thread or root really, more like that, because it was like, okay, now that you've done that, now we can start getting into the colonization. Okay, now we can get into, and it just goes deeper and deeper. And but I remember reading about stuff like that, like reading about people saying like, oh, I've got this key that like Matthias de Stefano, or like listening to you talk about it. And I was like, wow, I wonder what that's like. And now that this stuff is actually happening to me and not just something I'm reading about in books, it really is largely unconscious, and where you'll just find yourself called to go and just trust the call. And sometimes it'll be, I'll just be walking a neighborhood in Chicago and it'll be like, hey, go down this road. Or I was in New Orleans last September speaking, and I ended up on a walking tour with a woman who was like basically a priestess from not voodoo, but like the religion that precedes it, right? And I was like, whoa, what are we both doing on this tour? And we ended up in a clearing where enslaved people would gather and dance on their one like free afternoon. And you could feel the trees, like just how much was in the land of like that time and that energy. And we just stood in the center and just allowed ourselves to be just vessels to move the energy around. Like there was energies that wanted to leave and go to the other side. There were energies that just were looking for healing and a witness, you know?
Mhm.
And it was really wild, you know. But I was there for a completely other reason, right? And I was just like, oh, this
Right.
looks like fun. This walking tour, this looks like a fun time. And then before you know it, you're doing like, oh my gosh, I'm doing like, you know, land healing. And it just, it happens by virtue of our body, sometimes just being in that right place at the right time and trusting our instincts, whether it's to, you know,
Right.
hug
Trust,
that
trust, trust. I
tree.
mean, those are both, they're so huge. Trusting. During the middle of COVID 2020, I went on a tour to Egypt, right? And
I
then,
remember.
which was phenomenal, right? And there was no one there, which was so extra phenomenal. We got to sit in these sacred sites and temples for hours with no one there. You know, you could just whatever soak it in, but then a few months later, I was in the Yucatan at Chichen Itza, another sacred site, another pyramid. And then 3 months later, I was at the Bosnian pyramids. And I at the end, I looked back and I said, oh my gosh, in 9 months, I was called to three continents and three pyramid groups. I, it was not planned. I'm going to go make this thing happen. Everything just fell into place as it does really when we're in
Yeah.
alignment to our own soul plan, to our akash, to our purposes, right, to our higher
Hmm.
selves. When we really are energetically in alignment, things show up, things fall into place. And so having that faith is huge. And
Yeah.
I completely agree. The other thing is about being embodied, really being the sovereign of your physical body. Your soul made a contract with the body that you're in to come together
Wow.
and create here on this earth at this time. And when we kind of diss the body and ignore the body and spend all of our time kind of out in the ethers, we're actually not fulfilling that contract with the body. And it becomes much harder to create and manifest whatever it is we want to create and manifest in this world, in this plane and dimension. So it's a huge piece when we talk about getting grounded, owning your own energy field and space, right? Being the
Yeah.
sovereign, being the queen or king, right? Of the
Hmm.
body,
Hmm.
not letting all sorts of people fill your field and pull you around energetically and get into your head. And so, one of the things I teach, and I teach again in the book, in Akasha, I teach you these tools, these guided visualizations and energy tools to become the sovereign. I teach a
Yeah.
simple tripod grounding system to really get grounded and connected deep into our dear Gaia. Mother Earth is a sentient being, right? So connecting to her beautiful heart, which is her crystalline core, and asking for her help to stay embodied, right? Grounded and present in our world right now, so that we can do what we've come to do. And
Yeah.
so really having that faith and being the sovereign of your physical body, really fulfilling those contracts, are really powerful spiritual teachings.
That's beautiful. Would it be fair to say that we have a contract with Gaia herself to be here?
Some of us absolutely do, not everyone per
Not everyone.
se, but
Gotcha.
right, the earth, there are big groups of earth guardians. That's what I realized when I came as a whale back in the ice age.
Back in
Some
the day.
150,000 years ago or whatever it was. And I
Wow.
pledged, I like kind of pledged my soul to help to support Gaia herself as this sentient being. And so, again, even in coming back at this point, as she is awakening, we
Yeah.
will all awaken because we can't be on this planet energetically as she awakens and not actually eventually awaken. Or, the hard human aspect is that I believe many souls will say, I'm not really ready for this now. Maybe I'll come back and try this again later.
Mm-hmm.
But many of us have contracts to help to support Gaia, to care for our waters, our air, our earth, the land. So there are huge earth guardian contracts out there, as some of those like earth guardians and rebalancing divine feminine, divine masculine, and
Mm-hmm.
ending war is part of a huge
Yeah.
contract that so many of us are working on in so many different ways. We might not even realize it, but it's about moving to peace and sharing whatever
Mm.
we can about moving from that state of, anger and hatred and shame, blame, guilt into a space of peace, which is where we start to create the new earth.
Oh, ooh, I love it. I and I also I want to kind of like bring it back because when I think about this, sometimes we can slip into like there are these huge, like you say, like these huge contracts. And I just want to emphasize too, like this gets played out in the microcosm. It gets played out like it doesn't always have to look like traveling to Egypt during the
Right.
pandemic or you know what I mean, or hugging,
Right.
you know, stone circles that are tens of thousands of years old. Like those are all amazing experiences, and we all have access to those, as much as we can. And it also plays out in, how we interact with our neighbor. You know what I mean? I wanted to kind of like what
Yes.
I see is that we have these big contracts, but we also, but it matters. Like every interaction matters, like how we are with our children, like how we are with our garden. You know what I mean? Like how we interact with the person behind the cash register at Panera. You know what I mean? It's like there's all of these many ways that we can be part and parcel and contributing to these contracts, but in ways that might seem, it doesn't have to look like
Right. Right.
activism or books or movements. It can look like that too, and that's but everyone's piece of the medicine is so key and important. We have a different way of expressing it, and yeah, so it's really I find that too just very comforting
Mhm.
and strangely comforting maybe, but very comforting and helpful in kind of riding the waves that are, that this new earth that we are co-creating, um, remembering that it's like it's about the big stuff, but it's about the small stuff too.
Right.
That
Absolutely. I mean, I
it's
would
all
say that,
connected. Yeah.
right, purposes is what they always say. We have so many purposes, and so many of them are very much about our families, and that might be healing a pattern with your parent that's been a karmic pattern, or it could be about really doing great works in your neighborhood. Maybe it's a neighborhood, right? Garden, or teaching children how
Mhm.
to start to grow food, or so many of my, of course, clients and students do their work very, very locally. And honestly, the record keepers often say that that's part of what we're creating, and what part of what kind of COVID was triggering was bringing us
Mm.
back into community, more local community, so that people aren't driving 3 hours away to go to work and be away from their friends or families for 12 hours a day kind of thing. And so it's about coming back. It's about eating
Mm.
locally grown food. I mean, all of these aspects are so important. And so if you never leave your community, that could be so perfect, right? Because that's your
Yeah.
unique soul's plan. Mine happens to be a little galactic and crazy, so I do, but,
I love it. I love
but
it. I
really,
love going galactic with you.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Oh my goodness. Well, um, this has just been an amazing journey. And I'm like, how do we land this spaceship? I would, how, what is, so let's come full circle. Let's come back to the book. How can people find it? Where can they, I'm sure it's available at all the places, but
Right.
you tell us, where can we find you? Where can we find the book?
Yes, so you can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Canada or in Europe, wherever. Um, so definitely available there. You will find it also on my website at akashicknowing.com. And I am offering for a time 4 free gifts when you purchase the book. And so that's
Oh,
super fun because you get a couple of recorded meditations and visualizations that I write about in the book. And you actually
mhm.
get the whole audio with music as a free gift. So there's four
Oh,
of
cool.
those gifts. So if you want to go to akashickknowing.com, you will find the top banner that's Lisa's new book with 4 free gifts, and that will connect you up to purchase it at Amazon, and then put that code in and information so you can
Got it.
download your gifts and do that. So that's a great way, as well as, of course, the all the regular wonderful outlets that we have.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, oh my gosh, Lisa, thank you so much for just gracing us with your galactic earthly presence. It's really just such a pleasure always to be in your energy, and the way that you are able to connect the stratosphere, like that galactic aspect with the earthly aspect, I think is just so very special, and just and make it like what I love about your stuff too is it's like, yeah, I could see that. Like it's doable, it's tangible, it's accessible. Like this is the time, right? Like this is the time. For us to, you write about this in your book, like how for a long time you couldn't just access it, right? Well, you talk about this earlier. You couldn't just access the Akasha. Now we're in this time period where we're awake enough, the energies are shifting enough, raising enough that it is time for all of us to have this access to that greater perspective that just affords us so much transformation, healing, wisdom, all the rest, joy that we can bring forth
Right?
with
And that's a
access.
big
Yeah.
point, joy. We come to enjoy this world, and
What?
both. Yeah, I know, right?
What?
You
We're
know,
not just here to suffer?
I know, right? We really are. And that's what we're creating. And you and I, we are both mothers. I have 3 children, and I'm going on my 33rd year of marriage. Isn't that kind of wild to start to think about that? And so it really is about these lives and
Yeah.
accessing the joy, the wisdom, the energy through the body, through the soul, right? Connecting to your own soul guidance and wisdom through your Akashic records. And that
Mm.
really truly is the way the record keepers always say. It's just come and align with your soul. You don't need any super special gifts. You don't need to be trained as a clairvoyant or psychic or energy healer. I literally teach you all of these things in my online workshops that I
Mm.
teach many times a year, and I teach a ton of it in this brand new book. So it's a phenomenal place to start. Just go
Yeah.
look up Akasha with Lisa Barnett on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or my website, so you get your 4 gifts and start to do that. And it is the time now, really, for everyone. That's what the record keeper said so many years ago. Please help us to share this wisdom with humanity, because it is everyone's birthright to access their own Akashic records and to understand who they are as infinite and wise souls.
Oh, I think we're just going to land it right there because that was perfectly said. Beautiful. Thank you so much. As I always close every show, from my heart to yours, I love you. I love you, Lisa. I love anyone who's listening, watching. Take what you need and pass it on. Mwah. Thanks for joining me on Wise Body, Ancient Soul. I hope it reminds you how magical and powerful you truly are. Kindly subscribe, rate, and review this podcast so more juicy light bringers like you can hear these transmissions. And if you're looking to connect more deeply with your body and soul's wisdom, visit CharisseSisou.com to learn how else we can play together. Here's to your joy and wild success. From my heart to yours, I love you. Take what you need and pass it on.